Hello, Simon, and welcome to the latest episode of the series In the Know with a CPO. I'd like to welcome Simon Helliwell, who is CPO of Silverstream Technologies, which is a market leader in clean tech in the maritime industry. Got that right, haven't I, Simon?
Yep, that's spot on. Thank you, Olivia, and I'm a pleasure to be speaking to you today.
Brilliant. Well, look, I'd like to just tell everybody a little bit about your background, because you've done a couple of things that are unusual in our space. First of all, you have an engineering degree. So how you came to be in HR, I think it might be a discussion for another time because we could be here for a while. But an engineering degree, you started your career in engineering. You've had a big corporate career in brands such as Mars, and latterly in your HR specialty in HR leadership roles in RELX and the operating companies within that group. And you and I first met when you were coming out of that big corporate world. And now here we are a year later, and you are 6 months into this startup, incredibly innovative business. And it's an unusual move to make from big corporates to privately owned startups. It's a move that many people would like to make. They'd like to unshackle themselves from the corporate world. And it's a really hard thing to do. And I think what I'd like to do is discuss some of the challenges that you've faced personally and what many people will face in making this move. So my first question is, what has been the biggest challenge in making the move from big corporate to this little 125 person business?
Well, I mean, there's lots of challenges. I think what the upside is everything I hoped it would be, which is around, really passionate organization, one that moves at speed, and actually really resonates that you're so much closer to the customer and you get so much energy from that. But I think coming from a large corporate, one of the main challenges is coming from where there's a really established way of working to one where there isn't that established way. There's a lot of uncertainty, there's different ways of working, and you have to be prepared to really roll your sleeves up and look at the opportunities around you. You have to be able to rely on your experience, but you can't just take that experience and overlay it to the organization you've joined. You really need to think about what the ways of working are, what is the culture of the organization, because actually the business has been really successful without a lot of the things that and you're used to. And you have to kind of challenge yourself and say, well, what is the value that they were adding? I think the key thing for me coming in, of course, is that you're trying to drive change, and there's not the established ways of the guardrails you would know. There's not that sort of existing processes or existing way of working. And if you want to drive change, there's lots of people with lots of opinions. You have to really rely on your intuition and understand, what's right for the business at that point in time.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you and I talked about previously is you delving down into detail that perhaps you haven't had to do for quite some time, being quite tactical when previously you've been strategic, and trying to move things along without, as you say, those guardrails. Where do you find out? How do you know what good looks like in this organization? How do you make change in this context?
Yeah, well, I think you have to, again, rely on your experience, but also spend the time to really understand what adds value in the organization. A great example is that, we don't have any defined kind of goal setting, performance management processes at the moment. And you come in externally, you think, wow, where is all of this? But actually, there's a really kind of interesting way of working coming from a very small heart of an organization. And you've got to immerse yourself to that and really understand how that value is created, and then work and listen and build that sort of alliance with people in the business as well.
And we've discussed as well, and I, funnily enough, had a conversation with somebody who works a lot in really small privately owned businesses, supporting them in bringing in key roles like CPOs. And he was saying that you can't just run with one thing. You can't just go right, reward, right, as you say, performance. And you've used the word nudge. You've got to nudge things forward. Yeah. So, and how do you get anything done when you can't do, we can't give it the full focus that perhaps you would have done before?
But it's a good point, and I think there's so much opportunity. There's so many things that need to be addressed, and you can't spread yourself too thinly and do too many things. But equally, as you say, you don't have the opportunity and the luxury of just doing one or two things. So I think you've got to be ambidextrous. You've got to be able to juggle a lot of things at the same time, and you've got to be comfortable with doing something and making sure it's good enough for now. I use this sort of spiral concept where you need to touch a lot of different things, get them into sort of a reasonable order, and also use it as a sort of a pilot. You can get feedback, and at some point in time, you're going to come back and have to look at it again and sort of evolve it slightly. So I think you have to be able to have an eye on both the short term in terms of what are those immediate requirements, but also how is this building to a capability in the longer term? And again, relying on your experience and your intuition of how these pieces add up and how it actually adds value to the organization over time.
Yes. One of my other clients at the moment said, "Don't let perfection get in the way of the possible,"
Yes,
which I
exactly.
think is a very good mantra for this new
Yeah.
brave new world of yours.
It's the idea of being agile. You can gain 80% of the value in 20% of the time. And if you do that on a number of areas, you can come back and then look at capturing the other 20% over time. But you can make much more progress if you're able to sort of balance the short-term and long-term needs, but also look at and touch a number of areas that rely on people and organization.
Yes, and obviously you're not death by committee in a small to medium sized business, as perhaps you are in a big corporate. However, in an owner managed business, they do and have had previously the final say on everything. So how do you manage in that kind of more autocratic environment?
Yeah, I think it fundamentally comes down to building trust and credibility, and also really understanding what it is that the owner really holds strong. What's so important for them, and owners come from different backgrounds. I'm sure you have investment driven ones from VC or PE backs. Ours is a founder owner who's really passionate around what our product does, the opportunity we have. He's very commercial. It's all about growth and development, but actually it's fundamentally around the value that we add as an organization, and he sees that through people, and it's around understanding what's important to them, because they're also not really going to be too interested in the sausage machine, the how you get there, the nuts and bolts in the background. But you as an HR professional know what needs to be in place. I think it's around building the vision with them around what this can create and how it aligns to their vision for the organization. But I'd also say that it's not just about the owner. I think you also need to know, people in the business come from a range of different backgrounds with different experiences. I think you also need to sort of build allies and build understanding and credibility with people in the business as well, because it's a blend of bringing all of these things together. And I think for me personally, it's also being about transparent. Smaller businesses tend to be less bureaucratic, probably less political, and actually having a transparent approach, I think, really lends itself well.
Yes. And it's a juggling act, though, isn't it? You need to be transparent about what it is that you're trying to do, but you don't want them to get bogged down in your detail, which you're having to spend your time doing to get the basics right.
Yeah.
And we touched on that as well. You've gone back to basics because they've had nothing. You've had no guidelines, you've had no feedback because there's nothing. So how have you managed? It's a bit like sort of doing the opposite of GCSE maths. Don't show your workings.
Yes,
But how have you found going back to the most basic of HR and thinking, I need to get strategic?
Well, so I think this is a really important point, because I think it really then challenges you, or challenges me in this case, around, is this the right role for me? Because it's not about your ability to do the basics. You have to love it. You have to enjoy doing it. If you're coming in thinking, okay, well, actually, I want to sort of, ride this wave and be a part of the future, and we'll have to do a lot of sort of basic stuff for the next 3 months or 6 months or a year, but then I'll have this strategic role. That's not going to lead to success. You actually have to enjoy looking at the strategic, but also dealing with the operational piece. And for me, it's been a lot of fun going back to basics, looking at reward strategy, looking at job leveling, looking at recruitment processes, looking at policies and things. You've got to actually approach it with a level of vigor and rigor, but actually then have a real confidence and a vision of how that can really build the foundations, to use the sort of the metaphor, for the business going forward.
Yeah, I think I think it's a wonderful opportunity to really see where you get your energy from.
Yeah.
And when you're in any executive position, especially in a small business where you're one of a very small cohort of people who are hopefully passionate about the success of the business, your role is way more than the HR technicality, isn't it? You're a close-knit executive team, all with the common goal of business progression. And your HR background's your toolkit. In fact, your engineering background's probably your toolkit, given where you are as well at the moment. You use those tools to get somewhere, to move the business on. It's not about the HR itself. It's about those skill sets that the business needs. You leave some at the door and you'll bring some in, and you'll rummage around and find some ones like recruitment processes that you haven't used for a while, perhaps. But if you got the energy for that, then it's enormously satisfying. And the challenge is in the business success and building it and being part of the journey at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the way to look at it, which is, do I really want to be dealing with all of the, the process and infrastructure? No, but actually, I fundamentally see how it adds value and challenge. It gives the opportunity to scale, because if you stand back and say, what's our real strategic priority as an organization, or what's my strategic challenge? We have a really amazing market opportunity, and I encourage everyone to look at the Silverstream website and see what we do. We're growing incredibly quickly. We're the 4th fastest growing company in Europe last year in the Financial Times, and we have a kind of a roadmap of the next 3 to 5 years of where we see we can be as an organization, but we don't know the path to get there. And that's the thing, we've got to really build in the capacity and capability to scale. And I think, putting some of the solid foundations in place now really help us. But as we grow, we've got to think about, how do we move beyond being a UK-centric organization to being a global organization? How do we make sure we position the right culture? How do we avoid building functional silos? And this ability to really think about the roadmap going forward. We've got to think about whether we're going to build everything ourselves or we buy capabilities in. So, we've been developing a set of organizational design principles which will guide us on that journey. So, again, coming back, a lot of the work that you have to do as a CPO in a startup or a scale-up organization is getting you ready to scale, and then that gives you the platform to then focus on really enabling us to grow, scalable and strategically over the coming years.
Yeah, I mean, well, the way you describe that sounds like the most exciting opportunity that is out there. So, well, you're 6 months in. I wish you the very best of luck. It's lovely to catch up with you, and thank you for your time this afternoon, Simon. And I look forward to hearing how it all goes.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure, Olivia. Thank you very much for the opportunity.